All right, so you sit down in your craft room or at your craft table, ready to create, but nothing comes to mind. You shuffle your supplies around, you stamp an image here, cut a piece of cardstock there, but no matter what you do, it just doesn't feel right. And the longer you keep trying, the worse and worse you end up feeling. If you've ever been there, trust me, you are not alone. Today I'm going to be sharing my top 5 tips for breaking through that creative block, especially for us crafters and card makers. I promise it's going to be okay. Sometimes creative block happens because we're just looking at things the same way over and over again. Whenever you go into your craft room to craft, what is the first thing you usually reach for? For me, I tend to grab a stamp set that I'm feeling drawn to, but the problem is sometimes I'm not feeling drawn to any stamp sets, and the ones that I am feeling drawn to, I still can't figure out what to do with them. If you always start your crafting sessions in the same way, in my case, picking out a stamp to use for the focal point of the card, try approaching it from a different perspective. Instead of picking out a stamp for the focal point, why not start with creating a pretty background and see where that leads you? And if you're really in a pinch, one of my favorite tricks is to go through my old cards and find one that I feel really drawn to and ask myself, why am I drawn to that card? Is there a specific technique, color scheme, image? What is it that I like about that card? And then try to take that and turn it into something new. Another perk of this is it is a good reminder that you have created beautiful things in the past and you will create beautiful things again. This might sound counterintuitive, but sometimes having too many choices is the problem. Try giving yourself a challenge. Set a timer for 20 minutes and tell yourself at the end of that 20 minutes, I'm going to have a finished project. No overthinking, no time for second guessing, just go with the flow and trust your own abilities. Or you could try limiting yourself to a certain number of supplies. For instance, pick out 3 to 4 supplies and tell yourself, that's it. These are the supplies you're going to use to make your card. It forces your brain to work in a different way. I think you'll be surprised at how creative you can get when you give yourself these boundaries, and sometimes the end results can be really surprising. A lot of times when I'm having a difficult time figuring out what I want to make, I'll have my partner Adam come into my craft room and pick out a few supplies for me and then force myself to make a card using those supplies. Now, this can be extra challenging because Adam's not a crafter, so sometimes he throws me a curveball, but now that I have my parameters and my limits, I'm able to move forward. And this is something you can do yourself, or if you have a supportive crafty friend or partner, have them pick out some supplies for you and just see what happens. It's a fun way to get you moving forward and also makes crafting a little bit more social. Another trick, try making a bad project on purpose. I know, it sounds kind of crazy and counterintuitive, but when you stop trying to make something perfect and just focus on experimenting, you loosen up. Sometimes I'll sit here in this chair and settle with myself, okay, Ralph, whatever you're about to make is going to be ugly, and that is okay. At least you're making something. You'll be surprised what you can come up with when you give yourself permission to play. Inspiration doesn't just come from crafts, you can find it all around us. You can find inspiration in movies, TV, fashion, home decor, nature, the list goes on and on. Personally, I draw a lot of inspiration from music, and one of my favorite tricks for when I'm kind of in a crafting funk is I like to come into my craft room and turn on music that is similar to whatever vibe or feeling of card that I would like to make. And just allowing myself to sit here in that energy just kind of allows the creative ideas to bubble to the surface, and I'm oftentimes surprised at what comes out. But if music isn't your thing, that's okay too. You can find inspiration everywhere. For instance, just walk around your neighborhood and take a closer look at the things around you. Look at the grass, the flowers, the color of the sky. I promise you that something may just inspire you. I find myself all the time as I go about my everyday life looking at the things around me in terms of cards, which I know probably makes me sound like a crazy person, but if you're a photographer or a painter, I'm sure you can understand. When I was younger, I was really into photography, and that was kind of a trick that I picked up on. I would go about my life and literally like frame the things that I see as a photograph, and that's something that's kind of stuck with me. And now that I focus more on crafting and making cards, I find myself a lot of times looking at things and thinking, that would make a really great card. Whether it's a texture or an image or a funny saying, the inspiration is all around us. Okay, this might be the hardest one to hear, but sometimes the best thing you can do for your creative block is to put down the crafting supplies. Walk away. No matter how much I wish we could, creativity simply cannot be forced. If you're starting to get frustrated and feeling stuck, it's probably a good indicator that it's time to take a break. Go for a walk, make a cup of tea, do something completely unrelated, and if you feel guilty for stepping away, I want to remind you that you come up with your best ideas when your brain has space to wander. That is why people get their best ideas in the shower, right? So give your brain some space to wander and let that creativity flow back to the surface. And to my fellow content creators out there, or anyone that does any type of art or craft for work, I want to remind you that your creativity has never and will never operate at the speed at which social media algorithms and capitalism requires. So go ahead, cut yourself some slack. You deserve a break too. This one is big, and honestly, the one that I have the most trouble with. A lot of times, your creative block is less about not having any ideas and more about the singular idea that what you're about to create has to be perfect. You sit down at your craft table, and suddenly that blank piece of paper in front of you becomes incredibly intimidating, and suddenly you feel like what you're about to make has to be the best card you've ever made, or painting, or drawing, whatever. But here is the truth: your art, your crafts are not meant to be perfect. It's about joy, it's about self-expression, and it's about creating something with your hands that didn't exist before. Because I do struggle with this one so much, I've actually been considering picking up a new crafting hobby outside of card making, just so that I have a creative outlet that's not necessarily tied to my job. A job that I love very much, granted. We have to let go of this idea that everything we do has to be perfect. We need to give ourselves a space to play and experiment and just be. Because when you enjoy the process rather than worrying about the outcome, that's when your creativity has the space to shine through. Creative block happens to everyone, and it does not have to define you as a creator. You are more than the ideas that you have today. You are the passion and the heart behind them. I want you to think back to the very first time you created something with your hands. It could either be a drawing from school, or maybe even the very first greeting card that you made. Do you remember that feeling? That spark of excitement? That is creativity in its purest form. And the truth is, that spark, it never actually leaves you. Even on days where you're second guessing yourself and inspiration feels out of reach, you are still a creative. You have creativity in you. If you take one thing away from this video, let it be this: your creativity is not measured by how many perfect projects you make or how many likes you get on an Instagram post. It's measured by your willingness to show up, to try, and this innate desire inside of you to add something meaningful to the world. So if you are feeling blocked, take a deep breath, trust yourself, and know that your creativity will return. It always does.